Rebecca Parker says, "Love, as I and many religious progressives understand it, is dangerous."
Amen.
We advocate for love that surprises, that disrupts, that alters the status quo, that expresses itself in diverse ways, that comes in rainbow colors. Dear ones, once upon a time, I was invited to a costume party, hosted by Scott Coyer, the coolest kid in my 5th grade class. I remember 5th grade as the year that I first began to take notice of the social hierarchy in my class and began to recognize that some of us were closer to the top of the pyramid of this hierarchy, and more of us, myself included, perhaps closer to the bottom of the pyramid. And so I was particularly interested in the rules of this game. How does it work? Why are some people up here and others down there? Was I at the bottom of the hierarchy because I still wore sweatpants to school when everyone else had moved on to jeans? Or because word had gotten out that I wanted to grow up and be a singer like Mariah Carey? Neither of them were good for me. As far as I could tell at the time, the most revered kids were the ones who were the most skillful at making fun of other people, which made the whole system, theologically speaking, a certain kind of hell. Looking back, the pyramid seems to have been mostly correlated with gender roles and who was the best at performing their part. Girls with fashionable outfits were higher on the pyramid, as were boys who were better at playing sports or hiding their feelings. So back to the high-stakes costume party. I had spent weeks deciding whether to go as a clown or an army guy. I went back and forth, couldn't make up my mind until at the very last second, when we were just about to head out the door for the party, I changed my mind for the last time, threw the clown costume aside, got on my army guy outfit, and off we went. So when we arrived at the party, you can only imagine my terror and relief when I realized that it was not actually a costume party. It was an army-themed party. And I won the award for Best Dressed. To this day, it's the only time anyone has even considered giving me such an award. It's true. And you would think that this small miracle of good fortune would have left me feeling in pretty good spirits. But I was actually just as freaked out as ever, knowing that I had escaped such massive embarrassment by the skin of my teeth. I knew that even if I'd been momentarily dealt a good hand, the rules of this game were still stacked against me. Fast forward a couple of years, and I attended a summer camp where those rules seemed to be turned upside down. There were certainly still folks who were more popular than others, but they seemed to be the ones who were the warmest. They were the ones who were the most welcoming. Love and respect went to the people that invited newcomers into the circle, into the conversation, the ones who fostered connection instead of competition. More love, less hate. If you have places like that you found, would you say out loud right now, more love?
More love.
I remember wondering, how on earth does a place like this even happen? How did these camp counselors find all of the kindest and most generous people in the country and bring them together for this 1 week every year? One conversation that answers that question has stuck with me. I was on a long walk with a new friend, and I don't actually remember exactly what I said to him, but basically I bragged to him that someone who we were both close friends with had given me a friendship bracelet instead of him. I know. As we all know that the social currency of hippie love camp, friendship bracelets are in fact the gold standard by which everything is measured. So here I was, enjoying this person's company, and then saying this awful thing to him about who was closer friends with who. What I thought I knew about people and community and relationships was this boxing ring mentality where whoever threw the best punch would win. But my new friend responded to me with a kindness, responded to me with love in a way that I literally did not know was possible. He made eye contact and he smiled at me. And he said sincerely how happy he was that I was finding a home here. More connection, less competition. If you have people like that in your life, would you say out loud right now, more connection?
More connection.
Whatever nonsense I'd learned about social hierarchy or whatever awful lessons I'd internalized about how men are supposed to speak to each other, I saw for that moment at least for the ridiculousness that it was. I didn't feel shamed by him, but I felt silly for having been stuck in this old, unhelpful way of thinking, believing that competition and put-downs would get me somewhere. He had literally loved the hell out of me. Friends, if we hope to build a more loving and just world, we need mentors like this. People who will teach us the tools and the skills for building beloved community, even when it can feel like swimming upstream. If we have any hope for building the kind of world we want to live in, we need to seek out those mentors who love us enough to meet us where we're at, and then love us enough not to let us stay there. And then we need to be that person for others. In the midst of a political and economic climate that is increasingly designed to set us apart one from another, to divide us by religion and race, by documented and undocumented, by gender, it is a bold thing to join together in this Unitarian Universalist tradition of love and justice. Would you say love and justice?
Love and justice.
And it's a powerful thing to seek out the kinds of communities that will teach us those skills, that will give us the courage for dismantling false binaries wherever we find them. One useful tool for building beloved community in times like these is to build some skills for supporting mass protest. And to this end, I was years ago trained as a street medic, the folks that provide free medical care to protesters at mass demonstrations. At this training, though, back in college, in addition to learning the proper technique for removing pepper spray from skin, another tool for beloved community has particularly stuck with me. At the beginning of the training, we were asked to introduce ourselves by sharing our name, where we were from, and the gender pronouns that we used. All my life, people had read my gender in complicated ways. But this was the first time that anyone had explicitly offered me the option of identifying my gender as I wanted, as felt right to me. No one had ever asked before. Going on to learn the stories of transgender people in my life and in my reading, my heart opened and I began to recognize how the multitude of behaviors, of feelings and thoughts and preferences that make me who I was have been carved up and placed in these narrow boxes of gender. The invitation to share my pronoun was an offering. You don't have to call yourself by what the world has always called you. You are invited to show up as your whole self, no costume required. The narrow boxes of gender limit us in different ways for different people. I recently heard a story about basketball star Wilt Chamberlain, who despite being one of the greatest basketball players of all time, was terrible at shooting free throws from the foul line. He normally made only an atrocious 40% of his free throws, except for one game, March 2nd, 1962, where he made 90% of the throws. The difference in this one game was that he shot all of his free throws, almost all of them, underhand from between his legs, granny style, as I learned to call it. This is a much better way to shoot free throws, and this game showed it. Despite having immediately solved his greatest weakness as a player, in the last part of the game, Wilt Chamberlain went back to shooting overhand. A worse way to do it, because he said throwing underhand made him feel like a sissy. To the greatest basketball player of all time, the only thing more important than basketball was not looking like a sissy. Will Chamberlain was clear that the narrow gender box of his masculinity was more important to him than basketball, more important than his career. I wish that he perhaps had a camp friend or maybe a progressive faith community like this one, who could have, if at least not loved the hell out of him, at least loved the bad free throwing out of him. Religion ought to be a place where we dismantle the boxes that have been placed over us and locked down around us. If you agree, would you say out loud right now, dismantle the boxes?
Dismantle the boxes.
It should be a place where we confront oppression wherever we find it, so that the inherent worth and dignity of every one of us can shine a little brighter. Dear ones, for those of us who were raised as boys and educated into masculinity, we have sometimes chosen misguided understandings of status or power over our relationships and over our authenticity. We have seen the consequences of these choices now reflected back to us in the mirror of our national politics and everywhere where women or transgendered among us or even the earth are treated as objects to be exploited. If, like me, this describes some piece of your own story, will you commit with me to rebuilding the skills for beloved community that respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person? If so, would you say beloved community?
Beloved community.
Similarly, for those of us educated into the myth of whiteness, we have sometimes valued our comfort over justice. We see this also reflected back to us in a country where black and brown people are scapegoated for the devastating effects of wealth inequality and are executed in the streets by our government. So in this moment of national reflection that I believe we're in, will you join me in recommitting to moving through discomfort into education, into witness, into advocacy, and into organizing for justice? If so, would you say organize for justice?
Organize for justice.
In Canada a year ago, a particularly concerning video went viral online. The video was a conservative religious woman, a mother, rapping of all things, about how confused transgender people were and why they should not be allowed to use the bathrooms that were appropriate for them. An 11-year-old Unitarian Universalist friend of mine saw this video and was deeply concerned. He wanted to respond because, having grown up in a Unitarian Universalist community, he was confused that anyone would ever think religion could be used for discrimination. As someone who himself identifies as gender creative, his experience of faith community had been the first place where he was totally accepted without reservation. And so he organized his mom and then dozens of other community congregations across Canada to participate in making a new video, a video sending messages of love and support to the trans community and proclaiming the role of religion in celebrating our full humanity, regardless of gender expression. When 11-year-old Anthony's mother expressed concern about the possibility of him posting a video of himself online, speaking out particularly as a gender creative person, she said, "Some people out there might hold this against you." But 11-year-old Anthony responded, "Right, that's not a reason to be quiet. That's a reason to speak up." If you agree with 11-year-old Anthony, would you say out loud right now, speak up?
Speak up.
In our world today, not only are individual prejudice and hate still with us, but there are systems of expanding violence and isolation that continue to divide us by gender and race and class. Bigotry in our world isn't just about hate speech and religious tests for refugees. It's also in the school-to-prison pipeline, gender policing, and our systems of healthcare and housing and finance. I have a role in those systems, whether I like it or not. And I have so much to learn still about the ways that my own identity intersects with the world around me. And so I'm looking for the communities, I'm looking for the people that can teach me the skills to dismantle those boxes, that can teach me the tools for beloved community. As a white guy with a middle-class background, I sometimes feel like I happen to wear the right costume to the party. So things, by accident, look more equitable than they are, or my community looks safer than it is. I need people like Anthony, people like my summer camp friends who mentor and model for me the tools of beloved community, because the nonsense I've internalized about gender roles, the other stories I've been told about who I am and how to be are so damaging. I'm learning still what it looks like to find those moments where we can change the rules of the game. So dear ones, I invite you to join me in seeking out those mentors that can show us the better way that we didn't know was possible. Would you say out loud, mentors?
Mentors.
When we find ourselves divided into false binaries, let's respond by honoring the full spectrum of humanity. Would you say honoring?
Honoring.
Where there is oppression, let us find the tools to celebrate diversity and dismantle the barriers to equality. Would you say dismantle the barriers?
Dismantle the barriers.
Where many are among us are marginalized, let's redistribute the power of resources and wealth and relationship. Would you say redistribute power?
Redistribute power.
And with our prayer, our words, and in our faithful action, let us build the beloved community that we know is possible. Just say beloved community.
Beloved community.
Our closing hymn was written by Bernice Johnson Regan, founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock.